My name is Haley, and I'm an outpatient therapist, and that's about it. I like long walks on the beach. Okay, so some objectives for today. We're going to talk about what is polyvagal and how it can help you in sessions or with your clients, how to apply the principles of polyvagal. We're going to identify factors that impact the autonomic nervous system. So we're going to talk a lot about nervous systems, nervous system reactions, things like that. We've got a choker. I'll let you finish. We're also going to talk about internal family systems theory, and then the biological connection between polyvagal and IFS, and then we're going to talk about how to integrate the two theories into one. Okay, so our autonomic nervous system. This is just a brief overview for right now of what it kind of does. It's basically based on all of our experiences, the way it kind of reacts to things. You'll see a lot of heightened nervous systems with people with prolonged trauma, live in stressful situations, people that are in it or have been in it and are out of it and are having this reaction now, those kind of things. So it basically focuses on the importance of safety and connection. And we all know that all human beings and mammals love to feel safe and connected. Okay, so the nervous system has two main subsystems. There is the central nervous system. This is everything that is your brain and spinal cord. And then we have the peripheral nervous system. This is everything that is not your brain and nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system also has two subsets. So we're just kind of going down and down, okay? There's a somatic system, which we're not going to talk about, but we are going to talk about the autonomic nervous system. This is the part of your nervous system that connects your brain to your internal organs. So this is why when you have, you kind of experience some kind of stimuli and you're starting to feel anxious, it's why your heart races. They're directly connected. It's the best way I can describe it. So the peripheral autonomic nervous system also has some subsets, okay? So we have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. If any of you have ever done yoga, you may have heard of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is what's kind of in charge of your fight or flight responses. It helps you in your time of need and kind of assesses for safety, those kind of things. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is why you would hear about that in yoga, is responsible for rest and digest. So each one responsible for two different things, and you can kind of in your brain, when you think about anxiety and stuff, figure out which one is kind of regulating, which one's not. So, and this is just kind of like some things that happen within your body depending on which one you're in. Okay, so our autonomic nervous system is constantly, whether you realize it or not, basically scanning for danger or safety. People that have heightened anxiety, you'll hear them talk about, they scan. They constantly feel like something's coming after them. Our bodies are constantly at work and in motion. So what happens when we're activated? Activation occurs when a stimulus comes at us and our nervous system basically responds. So if something kind of unsafe is coming towards us, or we're overthinking and we're kind of having some of those responses, these are some things that happens when we're activated. So there's chaos and confusion, pathologizing, hopelessness, helplessness, fear, ambiguity, frustration, heightened emotion, and disconnection. Remember a second ago we talked about that all humans and mammals love to feel connected. It's a safe place. Think of fuzzy puppies. We just want to feel connected. Or for Rachel, fuzzy kittens. So. Okay, so this is a good way to kind of categorize your autonomic nervous system, okay? This is the autonomic ladder. I first heard of this at a marriage and family therapy conference last year, and then kind of started studying it. It just makes a lot of sense. So when we're taking in information and our central nervous system is kind of processing it, that's what we call neuroception. It's just a response to stimuli. So within our autonomic ladder, we have the ventral vagal. This is like top tier. We're safe, we're connected, we're feeling good about life. Then we have the sympathetic, which is what we would also call mobilization. This is something's coming, kind of some fight or flight is kicking up. We need to run, find some safety, those kind of things. Then we have the dorsal vagal part of this ladder. This is, I cannot cope, I'm collapsed, I'm shut down. and we're freezing up. So it's important to understand with your clients that if someone is down here in the dorsal vagal, they cannot immediately jump to the ventral vagal. This is a hierarchy, and so you have to pass through each stage to move through to get to the next one, if that makes sense. A healthy ANS will move through these stages kind of throughout the day, but what we see with our clients is they get stuck in one or the other. That's why, some clients will come in, they'll be great, things are going wonderful, and the next week they're shut down and isolated. It's like, what in the world happened? A lot can happen. So, let's see. If you think of like people that have PTSD, this kind of explains why PTSD sufferers will a lot of times experience high levels of stress before they shut down completely. They can kind of see it coming, those kind of things, because they have to move through those stages. Okay, so when we think about initiating the ventral vagal, so trying to get our clients back up to that top part of the ladder, okay, to our safe and connected place. These are things y'all are already doing, and there's a reason why we do these things. These things are very important in sessions or when you're sitting with your patients, or tone of voice and body language are very important. Because as we communicate, our central nervous system is constantly interpreting and producing a negative or positive result. So if you're talking to your therapist and they're kind of like, looking away or falling asleep or, just shifting in their chair, you don't really feel very connected, right? So it's important to keep doing those things y'all are doing, making sure you're making good eye contact with your clients, you've got good body language, you're kind of facing them, you're open, those kind of things. It's also important to know that within a polyvagal system, this is really geared towards like our actual biology. It's not really intrinsic motivation or desire or anything like that. This is really like scientific, like what's happening within your body. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I think that's important to remember that this is just because we're thinking about something we may want or, that doesn't really have an effect on our central nervous system. So other factors to engage connectedness or that top tier of the ladder. Body posture again. So sitting up straight can actually increase comprehension and deliver a message of safety. So if you're kind of slumped in your chair, just leaning on your desk, like some central nervous systems when they receive that don't receive that as safe. So lack of eye contact again, these are all things that you all know as practitioners. Okay, so what does polyvagal informed therapy look like? Again, awareness of verbal and nonverbal communication and how they impact our clients. I'm reading it too, it's okay. Okay. Okay, so those are just a few things of what it looks like to be informed. Do y'all want me to read them out loud, or can y'all just, okay, good. All right, so when we apply polyvagal, quit laughing at me. This is, hello. So when we're applying it, we want to manage the impact of a response through practicing awareness and self-regulation. So this is why self-care is really important for practitioners, because we need to be aware of our own responses so that we can make sure our clients are having good responses also. Okay, so this is an interesting one. So someone that is not in a good place on the ladder, drinking or sipping on something cold can restart your autonomic nervous system process. Same thing with there's different techniques of holding one nostril and taking in a breath. Different kind of breathing techniques can kind of change the way we're responding to stimuli. How many of you ever heard a client say, deep breaths don't work for me? I've heard it a million times. There's a very important reason for that. So when we sit with a client and we tell them, let's just take some deep breaths, that's actually, when we look at polyvagal, not a good idea because it can activate other parts of our nervous system that don't need to be activated. So there's something I like to do in session. It's called breath mapping. So it's a very meditative kind of background. So feel your breath. Where do you feel it in your body? What does it feel like on your lips? Breathe on your hand. Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Let them, because that is a very they are in control of their breath, not you breathe with me, it's you take your breath, and so that helps regulate and feel more in control to clients. And then like focusing on an image or photograph, I've seen Kim do the 4-corner breathing. That's a really great one because you're focusing on something, so you're kind of grounding yourself. It's just grounding techniques basically, but being aware of how certain breath works and things can activate the wrong parts of our nervous system. So this is a neat thing too. It's kind of the same as the breath mapping, but scanning your body. It's interesting because, you know, when I ask clients, like, where do you feel kind of that emotion? What I've noticed is a lot of clients that have like childhood trauma, they feel it here, their chest. It's almost like this constricting, like they can't breathe. It's interesting how different experiences will impact where they feel their anxiety or whatever it is they're going through. A lot of people feel it in their stomach, some in their head. It just depends. So scanning is another way for clients to have control over what's happening in their body, and just you're increasing that awareness again. And so let's see if there's anything on there, like, again, just recognizing like where your pain's located, pausing for a moment and considering how your body responds to the environment and who or what may be causing the response, catching oneself and being able to intervene, noticing one's own increased breathing, the tension in the body, rapid heart rate, tightness, discomfort in the stomach, all those things we just kind of talked about. So that's why like just body awareness, body scans are really important with your clients, because sometimes our clients feel so out of control that this can be kind of difficult. So one way I like to assess before I do this with clients is just, you know, the butterfly tapping, because if a client is here, they're in control. The client's out here, they're out of control with their body, they're feeling very anxious. And so that kind of gives them a gauge too when they're not in session to go home and be like, where is my anxiety? You know, those kind of things. So just another way for your clients to have control and learn to regulate. Okay, so now we're going to kind of shift gears. We're going to talk about internal family systems theory. This is a theory I've been studying for about 1.5 years. I really like it. There's a lot of stuff you can find online about how to do it with children, how to do it with people of different cognition levels, those kind of things. It doesn't work for everyone, so there needs to be an awareness of who this might benefit and who it might not. So what is internal family systems theory? Internal family systems theory was developed by Richard Schwartz, and when he was doing family therapy, he became aware that as these families were communicating, and you've all said it, people would say, well, a part of me feels, or, you know, this part of me feels like this. And so he kind of developed that we might have these parts. So he started, this was probably like in the 80s. It's actually been around for a while. It's just kind of within the past few years really come to surface again, I think. But basically, it is the idea, just like how polyvagal, your experience shapes your response systems. This is kind of the same idea. So your experience from birth on influences your different parts. So when we think of parts, think of like your internal family, okay? And we're going to talk about those parts. So the first one, we have our self. Your self is basically the goal for your clients. It's where you want to lead from at all times. That's not really IFS specific. I think that's for a lot of different approaches. But think of yourself as like the CEO. It's in charge of the synthesis of your other parts, okay? So it's categorized by 8 C's: compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calmness, confidence, courage, and connectedness. Richard Schwartz believed that these were not things that were necessarily like built in a person, but we're kind of born with them and they're inherent within us. And so when you think about those parts of you, that's yourself. So then we have our exiles. Our exiles are those wounded parts of us. Think your wounded inner child. They can cause feelings of vulnerability and distress. And it can get messy. I mean, working with any kind of inner child work can get messy. This is very important. We're going to talk about our protectors in the next slide. But when you have your wounded parts and you're kind of talking with your clients about these parts, it is absolutely imperative that your client asks permission from the protector parts to talk to this part. So IFS is an interesting thing because I guess it's not really like multi-personalities, but you're asking permission to talk to these different versions of yourself, basically. So what are our protectors? There's two of them. The first one is a manager. Our manager are people who are overly successful. Probably a lot of you in here lead from your managers. Think of it as like the nanny trying to keep the problem child in check. You'll see a lot of people pleasing, a lot of controlling with this part. And basically it keeps the exiles from coming up and feeling that hurt again. And then there's another protector that's called the firefighter. The firefighter is what you see a lot of times with people with substance use. Think of it as we are going to extinguish this flame and never talk about it, you know. So you'll see cutting sometimes with this, but not all behaviors are bad with the firefighter. So some are extreme and just act as distractors. So people that distract themselves a lot, that could be them leading from their firefighter, those kind of things. So again, our protectors are our firefighter and our managers. They're trying to keep our exiled parts down and safe. It's important to ask permission when you're visiting these parts with your clients. There's a lot of psycho-ed in this. And it really is, like what I've used it with a lot of clients, what I've seen is it's a really wonderful way for clients to organize. They can organize their trauma, their feelings, all those things. Just like the polyvagal ladder, the ANS ladder, helps you kind of organize and have some self-awareness of where you are. So we're kind of joining. You see now? Okay. So in IFS, there are no bad parts. And so the goal of this kind of therapy is not to eliminate parts, but instead to get them to find their non-extreme roles. So how can we all live in harmony, but lead from ourselves? How can we be the happiest, most best versions of ourselves? And so we're basically building awareness of, what's the behavior? So like if we do a certain behavior, like, we're getting ready for school in the mornings and we yell at our kid because they're not going fast enough, but we actually have plenty of time. That's probably your manager coming up. It's just trying to keep us like on track and in charge and those kind of things. And so just those everyday behaviors that we do, it kind of builds up and starts adding, like giving some relief once we start recognizing them. So you can kind of say like, okay, yeah, I was leading from my firefighter, I was leading from my manager, whatever it is, or I was leading from myself, which is a wonderful thing. All right, so here we will talk about how they're connected. So our parts are connected with our autonomic nervous system. Again, all of our experience influence both of them. From birth on, they are forming, they are finding a home, they're doing it together. Nervous system regulation is important for these parts to feel safe and come forward. If you're at the bottom of the ladder, you're feeling isolated and shut down. Do you think your manager is going to come out? Do you think your true self is going to come out? No. You're probably going to lead from your firefighter or your exiled parts. And again, both of them are shaped by experiences. I didn't keep up my notes. Let me find them real quick. Okay. So let's talk about like where some of our IFS parts may live in our central nervous system. I think that there's a big possibility that our firefighters are living in our dorsal sympathetic. So that's that middle part of that ladder. Because they basically use energy to numb us. We're either feeling fight or flight, or like we start to feel that kind of shutdown coming. Our exiles most likely live at the very bottom because shame has been mapped at some point. And then the managers that work very hard to protect us, they're most likely sympathetically mobilized. So when you think of mobilization, that middle part of that ladder, you're going towards immobilized or mobilized. So you're on one or the other side of that. So managers are probably at the top part of that middle part of that ladder, if that makes sense. It's important to remember that our nervous system is a hierarchy. We talked about that a little bit. So like ventral oversees everything. And sympathetic's job is to help us come back to ventral, back to the very top, or to help us get back into our true self. So here's where IFS is kind of coming in. But either way, it wants to keep us out of dorsal. It wants to keep us out of that isolated and shut down. So when we're integrating these series, again, we talked about that self-firefighters, what kind of part or quality of your central nervous system they could be in. And let's talk about mapping. So this is another thing I do with my IFS clients. Mapping is a way to understand, let your clients understand and kind of have some control of learning where their parts are in their autonomic nervous system. You can map in different ways. I've used whiteboards, I've used stickers with kids. There's different things you can do to just whatever you think is appropriate for that client. But mapping basically provides a new way of understanding. So once we learn what nervous system response we're in, how it's emerging, those kind of things, then we can talk about why we think those parts are in it. We can talk about our histories, we can talk about memories, we can talk about all those things, but it's always important to understand that if you are on that bottom tier of that ladder, if you feel like a client is going to that bottom tier, let's be gentle with those parts, okay? Because there's a lot of fear with that inner child work, a lot of permissions that have to be asked. So I'll give y'all an example. I had a client one time who just really could not connect with her inner child. And so she was kind of envisioning her in her head, but she couldn't get to her. So I asked her to describe, why can you not get to her? And for a long time, she couldn't tell me. So that's when I realized she was too shut down to really talk about it. So we did some more polyvagal work, and she kind of moved up on that ladder. And so basically what she ended up telling me, she said, when I try to get to my inner child, she described it as like looking down a hole, and she knows she's down there, but when she tries to access her, there's a boulder on top of the hole. And so she just kept going around and around and around. And so we had to do a lot more just kind of regulation work, making sure she felt safe enough, asking those permissions, and she finally was able to access her. And it was a big breakthrough for her because a lot of stuff flooded, and stuff she had not remembered, but she was able to process that and kind of get on that other side of her trauma. So that's kind of how they're connected. It's just being aware of where your body is, where are you on that ladder, are you anxious, are you safe, are you connected, and then you can kind of go into these parts that, different things have helped form. These are my references. Does anybody have any questions? I know that's a lot of information.